Welcome to True House Stories, and always a big thank you and welcome. Because without all of you, there'd be no reason for us to ever do that. And thanks for always supporting, coming, and watching our shows. And today, we're going to go where the snow roams, lake effect snow, upstate New York. But this guy who I'm about to bring on is what I class as a top first generation DJ, the youngest of the class, kind of like me in house music. I was always the youngest of everybody, still am, even though I'm older now. But in the same token, he went on to do great things, coming from Buffalo, New York, making his way into Manhattan, playing in some of the hottest spots like 12 West, The Underground, Saint, and being very close to another iconic DJ that no longer is with us, the legendary Jim Burgess, and he'll tell you all about that. So we're going to go right into it because he's got a lot to tell us. I'd like to introduce to you to True House Stories, Mr. John Ceglia.
Lenny, great to be here, my friend.
Thank you, John, and thank you for giving us the chance to do this because John's hard to catch. He's got a lot going on in his life. Even though one thing I forgot to mention was he retired in '84 from DJ, but he's strong and better than ever and right back into it. But he'll tell you all about that as well. John, what's life like right now at the present moment? Because I went to see you not too long ago at your own party in Brooklyn again.
Yeah, and it was great to see you there, by the way. Yeah.
It's awesome. And I'm glad you're back, doing what you need to be doing behind those turntables. Well, I can't say turntables, the decks of the pioneers.
And we're still playing records, Lenny. That's what we say, right? It's a great record.
I refuse to hit the sync button. That's the thing. I won't do it. I can't do it because I play wave files, but I still have to adjust like I'm playing on turntables, just like the old.
So many are, yeah, no doubt.
Well, let's get right into this. I'm going to ask you the most important question, and no one paints a picture better than the person who lived it. Okay, so we like to get from when music found you as a young kid and where this journey took you.
Well, I mean, as the story goes, I was born in 1960. So when the Beatles made it here on that first Sunday night at Sullivan, I was just over 3, but, just already was very excited apparently. And, you had drumsticks and cardboard boxes in the living room when they came on, and I was jamming right along with them as my family, my parents used to tell me and my elder siblings used to tell me. But so that was really the start of it. And, there were always records in the house and there was music, big band music, because my father, even though it wasn't his profession, he was a musician his entire life, and he played saxophone and clarinet in big bands. So we always had that kind of stuff, being played early on. And I'm the youngest of 4. And so my older siblings, were into music and, buying some of the rock and roll records and some Motown stuff back in the mid 60s as I was growing up. And I quickly learned how to use the stackable, stereo system, and drop records. And I was playing vinyl by age 5 and 6 in my house, and started collecting, begging my mother and my father, can you please buy me this album? So it was started off with like the Beatles and some Motown stuff and some of the early rock stuff. And by the time I was in like 7th grade, I found the WBLS of Buffalo, WBLK radio. And, I got really into funk and soul music, the Philly sound, the Spinners, and, even stuff like Parliament Funkadelic and stuff like that. I loved all that early stuff. And of course, Stevie Wonder, Marvin Gaye, and that kind of thing really, really shaped my musical taste. So that's kind of how, things got going for me relative to my love and passion for music and collecting music at a very early age.
Do you, excuse me, training as well?
I don't have musical training, but in my professional like recording and production career, I've edited like a philharmonic orchestra with a Grammy-winning producer who's reading the score, and I'm doing the editing of this orchestra and the Buffalo Philharmonic at Carnegie Hall. And with relative ease. But I mean, I didn't really speak the language, but I understand. I guess I have a deep understanding of music and musical flow and that kind of thing. So he said it was a great session, and that was a real challenge for me working with somebody at that level. But I just think that sometimes, like how people they can play music by ear on various instruments without any training. It's that kind of thing, but I haven't had any formal training.
You know, you mentioned Paul McCartney. That's someone who could probably play every instrument known to man and never had any musical training.
Yeah.
It actually does me in every time I try to put my head around it.
Yeah, there's, in that era that we grew up with a lot of, incredibly inspiring artists. You mentioned Paul, who's, obviously maybe, the Mozart of our time, and Stevie, of course, was maybe my biggest influence and my biggest musical hero, if you will, just because of what he says in his music and, the kind of person that he is outside of it. But, he changed, R&B and soul music. So many people still are inspired by him to this day. And so, and he still resonates with me.
Okay. So I read somewhere that you played in Buffalo in the beginning. So
I
you're
did.
going to have to take us on from high school, I guess, or wherever you were. And
Yeah. So, the drinking age in New York State was 18 back in the, late 70s or even early 80s. But at 17, I graduated at 17 because I started school at age 4. So I was like one of the younger ones in the class. I started going to clubs because I like to just dance to the music. The first time I ever walked into a club, I think I heard, you're hearing music that you never heard on the radio. And it was still underground. And even here back in like late 77, 78, it wasn't really super top 40 yet. And so I was just blown away by what you're hearing on a big sound system and watching people dance, good partner dancers. I got into that for a little while. But I went to New York in 1978. And just as I was graduating from high school, and I was able to get into a couple of clubs with some friends, and realized when I saw the energy that the DJs were, letting out, and the people were just responding in ways I had never, ever seen before. I saw Frank Houlihan at the Ice Palace 57. I saw Francois at New York, New York, and I saw Jim Burgess, and I didn't know any of these people. I was just somebody in the crowd at Infinity on a Saturday night, and he played I Wish into You and I by Rick James. And one of the things people may not know about Jimmy because of the kinds of remixes that he did, very disco-esque, was he was really into R&B and funk music, and he played long opening sets that included a lot of that stuff. And also very late in his programs, he would include that as well. But I was still 17, and they opened a new club on my bus route home from school, and I marched into the club and asked to speak to the owner and told him I should be the DJ there with really no experience. And so they allowed me to play the teen dance there on Sunday afternoons for kids that were underage. And then when I turned 18, I was able to get a night there. And then I started connecting with the DJs in the other clubs around town and became friendly with them, joined the record pool. And by the next year, when I was 18, our convention center was opening here. And the first event was Donna Summers in the middle of her MacArthur Park tour. So she was really on top of the food chain at that moment in the disco world. And the next event a few weeks later was what they called the world's largest disco. And they had Gloria Gaynor, the Tramps, the Rays, Fern Kenny, all performing. They had DJ Mike Lewis from LA, who played at Studio One and Probe, I think. Wally McDonald from Toronto, Bobby DJ Godadaro from New York came. And when they came to town, I kind of stepped up and introduced myself to him and his manager, Marilyn Greenfisher, and gave them the tour of Buffalo, took them to different clubs, took them to Niagara Falls, hit it off very well with them. And I got to play for a huge crowd, approximately, the reports are somewhere within 14,000 to 17,000 people. And I kind of felt that night that I could hold my own, and maybe it was time for me to look to get to a bigger market. That February of 1980, I went to the Billboard Disco Forum in LA. They actually had 2 that year. And I had resumes and cassettes, and I was handing them out to people. And there I met Ray Caviano, and I met, Jimmy Burgess, and I met, so many people in the New York scene. Michael Ellis, who was really influential with me. He was from Buffalo. He did the charts at WKTU at the time, which was the #1 station, all disco in the country. And then he moved on to do the Billboard charts for years. So I went to New York a few weeks later to go out with him and Jimmy Burgess and Daniel Glass. And we went to Flamingo, and I heard Richie Rivera play. And so I started making more connections in New York, but I was still playing here at the local gay club, actually, on every Friday and Saturday night for almost a year. And that was a great training ground for me to go to New York, because they were very progressive. They were very open. You had to be on your game, but they were maybe the most fun crowd in this town to play for. And then in June of that year, before I went to work on a Saturday night at the club, Michael Ellis calls me around 8 p.m. I'm getting ready to leave for a 9 o'clock start. It was in June. And he said, the owners of New York, New York are opening Bonds in Times Square, and they're taking their DJs there. They have an audition tomorrow night starting at 9 p.m. I can get you in if you can be here. And I said, I'll be there. And so I worked the night, and then I went home and freshened up. And my brother dropped me off at the Amtrak station around 8, 9 o'clock. And I rode the Amtrak for about 9 hours or 10 hours. Went to Michael's house in Tudor City, his apartment in Tudor City, had dinner, and then went to the club. And there were a handful of DJs, there waiting. And Raul Rodriguez was kind of, handling the audition that night. And he said, he's traveled the farthest, so we're going to let him go first. So they started when the club opened at 9. So you're playing to an empty room. So I just wanted to kind of show that I had some technique with vinyl versus trying to wait to see if I can build some energy with nobody really in the room. We only had 15-minute sets each, as he said. So I'll never forget. He introduced me to their new light man, Richard Sabala, who went on to become a very famous light man and designer of lighting in clubs, did for the Black Party, for the Saint, and Fire Island. And he passed away, unfortunately, but was a super mega talented guy. But that was his first, club of his own. And I walked in, and Raul said, "This is John from Buffalo." And he just said, "Buffalo," and rolled his eyes. But we became very, very close after that very night. So I started to play, and it's about a half hour, 45 minutes goes by. And I'm like, when is the next person coming up to do their set? And I see Raul come by the booth, and I wave him over, and I go, "When's the next person going on?" He goes, "I sent them home like 10 minutes after you started. You start Wednesday, 4 nights a week." So that's how I got to New York. So this was a Sunday night. I had to take the train back home, pack. And then on Wednesday I left, and I came back, and I was living in New York by the Wednesday. So it only took a couple of days to get there, I should say. And then I stayed for 11 years.
Was that your first encounter with the RLA sound system? Because I know Richard put that system in Bonds.
It was absolutely. And so I had the pleasure. I mean, think about what I stepped into. So, and then when people that I had made, contacts with, over the past 6 months in New York, I would go stop and visit, folks at the record labels and say, I'm in town now. And so Jim Burgess says, well, you're playing at a major club. You need to be in the best record pool. So he walked me in, introduced me to Judy Weinstein, and she gave me a bin number in the W's. And then after like my first year or so, something opened up inside. I think I ended up at bin 14. And the people's names that were around me on the feedback sheet, I used to like pinch myself. It was Larry, and it was Jelly Bean. It was all these people, Robbie Leslie. I mean, you name it, like all these people that were like megastars at the time. And I just couldn't believe that, I was there, and I would see, folks like Danny Pucciarelli and those folks there every week when we would go pick up our stuff and drop off feedback and stuff like that. So that was good fortune. But after being at the Disco Forum in February, before I got the gig in New York, I wrote a letter to Bill Wardlow from Billboard, thinking that if I could get on a mixing techniques panel, maybe I could show myself into a bigger audience of maybe decision makers at the July forum. So before I even got that, I got, accepted to be on the mixing techniques panel with Jim Burgess and Bobby Viteretti and Mike Lewis and Hubert Charles from Washington. And, I was 19 years old. No one knew who I was. No one asked me one question. It was the last session of that convention that year. And it was packed because a lot of people wanted to see those big names, various DJs of the year and famous remixers all there. And you had club owners there, and you had other DJs, and the room was packed. And I had a really good showing. And I had never met Roy Thode, but he came up to me after And he said, I loved what you did up there. How would you like to play on Fire Island? I can get you in like 3 weeks at the Ice Palace in Cherry Grove. So I took that. So, I mean, that summer I got my New York residency 4 nights a week. I played on the Billboard panel. And then I played my first Fire Island night all within the first really 2 months from June to August. And then in the fall, I did a couple of sets for Mike Ellis on WKTU, Friday night dance parties. And the following year, I did the same for BLS. So I was getting some exposure, and it was just it was a whirlwind. But I was very fortunate to be where I was and surrounded by really good, supportive people.
So would you say that you stepped in some knee-high luck, or was it just that the timing was right?
I think it's a combination of that. The timing was right. And I feel like, my skill set was, I had really worked hard on what I was doing. And like I said, I was playing long nights for packed rooms here. And I tried to take, a page of what I heard, like the next summer, in New York. And the next summer I went and I heard other DJs. I heard Richie Kazor play. And, so I tried to take a little, whether it be whatever you glean, if you will, you know what I mean? Not like copying per se, but I understand what's going on here with structurally and what's, and you can really play that. And these people might really like it. Maybe it's just how you present it. And maybe it's the way you do it. You know what I mean? Maybe, it's reading the room the right way, but it's also how you get there from point A to point B. I always found that was like really the ultimate goal. Obviously, you want to play the record that's going to excite the crowd, but you also want to get there in a very, kind of smooth way, or a way that's going to be impactful in a positive way for the room. So always trying to do that as much as possible became, a thing. So like at that Billboard panel, everybody did mixing demonstrations. I'm the only one who got a standing ovation by all the DJs. They were standing on their chairs, screaming during my mix. I was like practically in tears. My hands were shaking. I had never felt anything like that before. And I was right in front of everybody. So I'm like, I better not make a mistake here and do something to the turntable.
What were you overlaying?
I overlaid, I played Girls Affair by Change, which was a brand new record. But I said, this is a combination of how you can play something old and something new. So I played Girls Affair, and I laid the whole intro of Souvenirs over it for the entire intro until that big piano thing came in. And with that guitar thing, it created something that was really cool. And people started standing on their chairs during the mix. And the way they describe it in Billboard magazine, they said he blended in, blended out. That's maybe how it sounded, but they kind of really worked well together, and they created something. And it even says he brought the crowd to its feet. So in the article, some people, Bobby Viteretti posts it once in a while because his picture's in it, my picture's in it. But yeah, so it was quite a moment for me.
Did you notice at the time that the DJs were not overlaying those long type of segues, that they were doing more a snapshot or banging the records in?
Here's the thing. So I was 19, I was impressionable, and the person that took me under their wing when I got there in some way was Jimmy. And Jimmy was like really an artist with that kind of thing. And so people used to compare, like, he listened to something I did at Me Analysis here in Buffalo before I got to New York, and before I heard, because there was no way for me to hear Jimmy unless I was there. And I only was there one night, heard the early part of the night, did not hear any of his more up-tempo disco stuff. I heard more of a funk set. So I didn't know what he was doing song combination-wise or anything like that. And there were like 3 or 4 mixes on one of my things. He goes, I've done that before. I've done that. So I wish I would have slip cued that. That might have brought a bigger energy point to the room. So when I started to play again, about 15 years ago, and slowly get back into it, I mean, I like to play a lot of the old stuff, but I really got into house music and missed so much. And I used to try to follow it as much as I could from far away. And when I came to town, I would go out and find things to do and listen to DJs that are still playing now that I'm big fans of. And so, but that became something I'm like, wow, I really miss this. And I want to play house music as well as maybe, sneak in a classic here or there, but I don't want to be just an oldies, DJ. So, but what I have done is I've incorporated that, like knowing when to do those, like really like intricate, fun, overlays that create something that isn't like a forced thing. That's like, okay, when are you going to like get out of this? Not something like that, but something that's like, wow, that was really cool. Or just doing something that's like snapping and quick and gets into that next record without making a big deal about it. And so I'm a lot more judicious, with that when I approach my nights. So that's kind of my style now. And I feel like I've grown a lot, well, it only took me, I started playing in 78. So, do the math. It's like 48 years to kind of figure it out, but better late than never, I guess.
David DePino would say, like, he would talk about himself and Larry Levan at Garage. Like, Larry was either on when he was on, and when he's not, he's not. A lot of times, that type of aggressiveness or just that banging that record in would do that. And he would always say about the DJs at the Saint, you, Jim, they mix like glass through the night.
If you do it right, sure. If you do it right, absolutely. But if you don't, the sneakers and the dryer thing isn't cutting it, man. And so it's like, when you start to do that, if you can't get it back together, and we're talking vinyl, what happens when you're dragging and pushing, you're changing the pitch. There's a whole boatload of crap starts to go wrong. So, you really got to be on your game, to do it. And like I said, to my fault, I probably didn't understand that, the way I could have back in the old days. And, obviously I can look at it and say, I wish I had, but you know what, after being away for a long time and doing what I get to do now every once in a while, I just feel blessed and, happy that I have the opportunity to do it. And each time I get a chance to get out there and do it, I put everything that I have into it, just curating a big crate of stuff that I can, kind of organically flow from, and just making sure it's the right thing for the right crowd, getting to play with some really incredible DJs that I admire so much, and one of the things about what Christina and I are doing with Come Together, it started out as my birthday party, but I said I would love for it to go on as a way to bring in these crowds that have like maybe roots that would be more garage and roots that would be more Fire Island and maybe more 12 West. And, whether they know it or not, even if they're younger, and bring them together under one roof. Because if you look at what's gone on Fire Island in the Pines over the last several years, they brought in some DJs with that background, like Danny Krivit and Ted Patterson have played the after party, which I have played before, which is an incredible event. It's the after party on Sunday afternoon from 3 till like sunset. And it's maybe 1,000 people, 1,200 people after the big 3,000 person beach party that they have the night before. And, they're mixing it up and they're bringing in, they're playing that stuff. And that crowd is receptive to it. And I think the whole idea with Come Together is to try to get people, even though they're shorter sets and you can't take a long journey with each DJ, it's more of a sampler and it's a little different for New York. It's a little more of a novelty, but it gives people a chance to kind of sample and taste other DJs as they kind of go back to back, where you would never get the opportunity to do that. So that was one of the things that we really wanted to do with it.
And I enjoyed it. I enjoyed that party. I enjoyed it. Yeah, it's a great party. I like the whole vibe. Something
for me, playing between, Hex and Tony Humphries. I mean, that's like, and I want to treat it like, I get a chance to play a lot of funky music because I grew up with funky music. And even though like when I played a couple of times at the Saint, and I don't think the owner was really a fan of like some of my slow like builds, with funky music, because I probably played a lot more of it black music than he would have liked me to play. And like some of that stuff would have sounded like you could have heard it at the Garage, and that first summer, by the way, that I was in New York, speaking of the Garage, the Record Pool anniversary party was there with Chaka Khan. And it was my first time there. And I got to meet Larry that night in the booth. And I didn't know him very well, but he was really, really, really kind to me when I went up there just to say hello. So I'll never forget that either. And that place was rocking that night, the For the Record anniversary party with Chaka.
Oh yeah. I heard that from others too. But I want to ask you now about your relationship with Jim Burgess, because that's an interesting life story. There's not many stories around with Jim because he's been gone since around 1990, if I remember correctly.
94, I believe. Yeah.
94. Yeah. So I would love to have got him on this show. Believe me. Jim came in and then Jim retired really early in his.
He did. Yeah, he did. He retired in January of 81. The Saint opened in September of 80. And he was one of the residents there. And he was a Wagnerian tenor opera singer, and his teacher was Shep Pettibone's mom. And Jim really wanted to pursue a career in singing. And he decided that he still wanted to remix and do that kind of stuff because, when I met him, he was doing everybody's records. Like I'd be at his apartment and he'd get a call from Maurice White. I was there one day and then he gets a delivery of a pinball machine and it's from the guys from Kiss for mixing I Was Made for Loving You, that kind of thing. He knew everybody, and he, Doobie Brothers, Rod Stewart, the list of great stuff. So he was one of the top of the food chain, remixers, but he wanted to get out of like the DJing side of it. And it was not too long after he stopped, it was about a year or so, that he decided he missed it a lot. And so it was a Good Friday in 1982 when he played his first night back, and we played together at the River Club, which I never played at technical 12 West, but the River Club is what 12 West became after the Saint opened. And there were still a lot of the same people that would go there, especially on nights that the Saint wasn't open. So anyway, it was a Friday night, and it was incredible night. Getting a chance to play with Jimmy actually was quite a thrill. But so that was what happened as far as he went. He walked away young, and there's a whole story about how he left, a couple thousand people there and walked out of the booth in his tuxedo and left the club in the middle of the night. And then Sharon White ended up picking up the slack and playing.
And people were really angry that he left.
They were. Yeah, in fact, the true story is, since we're on True House Stories, the true disco story, if you will, is that I was on the dance floor and it was around 6 a.m. And he's waving to me to come up to the booth. And he said, "I'm done." And I said, "Done what?" And he said, "I'm done playing. I've said everything I have to say. I want to invite a bunch of people over, to come over and celebrate." He said, "Do me a favor. I'm walking out. Take my records and bring them to my apartment and don't let anybody play them." So he left me in that booth to deal with that, which was a very, very awkward moment for me because Bruce Smellman, who owned it, knew that I was a DJ. In fact, that year they gave me a membership card, because I was, friends with a lot of the DJs that were there, and I got a complimentary card that year. And I said I can't do it, and he wasn't having it. He was pretty upset. But because somebody who had done a lot for me asked me to do this, I did what I had told him I was going to do. In hindsight, should I have done it? I sometimes wonder, but I ended up leaving, and there were records either up in the office that were Alan Dodd's or in someone's apartment like a block or so away. And they brought him back, and Sharon jumped in and probably played for another 5 hours until like, or 12, Sunday afternoon. Because this was January 31st, 1981. So that would have been a Sunday. But anyway, so that's what actually happened when he left.
Do you really kick yourself in the behind for not jumping on? Come on.
I couldn't get booked there for like until 1980. And so I wonder if that had anything to do with it. Probably.
Wait, so they gave you, they punished you for not taking over.
Pretty much. I think it had something to do with it, to be honest with you. But because I was playing everywhere, I was playing on Fire Island, I was playing at the Pines. One summer I had 5 Saturdays on Labor Day out there. I played a couple of nights at Studio. I was doing John Blair parties at the Underground. I was doing like parties for what they used to call GRID before they would call it AIDS and HIV, fundraisers for the HC and stuff like that. People knew me in the community, and I had a lot of people that liked what I was doing, but it was really tough for me to get in there. And I only played there twice, a couple of Sunday nights. I had a lot of fun because it was an amazing room, but it was just never that thing that meshed. And the DJs that were there, good friends and super, super talented. Michael Fearman and Robbie in particular were fantastic. And Alan Dodd was one of the best mixers on vinyl you'd ever hear. Talk about glass. Alan might be like at the top of the list. And if you ask somebody like Michael Fearman, he would probably say he's up there in the top 2 or 3. But, but listen, I don't have any regrets. I got to do a lot of great stuff. Back when I started, Lenny, you could go out any night of the week. There were so many clubs that you could choose from. Now trying to figure out the secret sauce to create an event, to get the right crowd there is, it's almost like you need a degree to do it. And, thank God, Christina is a partner with me, and she's been so great to work with because, of her expertise and the way she's loved in the community for, her incredible career. But has helped, me, to make this kind of thing happen. But yeah, back in the day, we were very fortunate, to be able to have so many clubs and so many DJs to go out and, listen to
Yes.
and to visit, so it was a great time.
Yes. And then I remember you doing your thing, and then you disappear around 84, 85.
I did.
Why?
I first of all, the music was changing a lot when the whole AIDS thing started to cast its dark shadow over the whole club scene and over life, really, and we were losing so many people. And I lost a lot of people that I had met over the years. It was really, really tough to see. And then the music also started changing a lot, and I wasn't like a fan of like what was going on in that late 83, 84, until house music really kicked in. That's when I started getting paying attention again. I knew it was more underground. After that whole 1979 thing that happened with the disco thing with where the White Sox play in Chicago, Comiskey, I believe. That was a really, really awful thing. But what it did do is it just pushed the whole scene back underground, kind of where it belonged. Because, before that, disco, everybody was trying to capitalize. Burger King had a disco spot. I mean, everybody made a disco record. Who shouldn't have? So many people. And there were every Holiday Inn on every corner, said, we'll put speakers in and we'll put some guy back there and they play these records and we'll have a disco and we'll capitalize. And so if that's all you ever knew, disco sucked in a lot of places. It wasn't great experience because there wasn't that much great DJ talent that could really take people places and really understood how to do it. But it went underground and resurfaced and came back. And when house music started, that's when I started paying attention again. And, I did a bit of a career shift at that time. And I've been doing this since then. I started doing production for like a television, like broadcast television commercials with big ad agencies in Manhattan, and which has led more into marketing, and also do some shooting and video editing now and that kind of thing. So I still do that as like my main income. But what I discovered as time was going by was that it's so in my blood because, I had a setup at my house and I would still play once in a while, just for myself, just to play. And once it went digital, I realized I didn't need to lug records everywhere, and I didn't have to. I could travel and play, and there's other ways I could get back into it because the scene is changing. It gave me hope that I could try to, get something going and maybe play a little bit different, maybe a new and improved version of myself, and play some music that I really want to play. And so I'm fortunate and that it has happened. And to the extent that it's happened, I'm very thankful.
I'm surprised that you, with you're doing editing and shooting and all that you didn't go into the remix world at the time when you were at the top of the chain.
I mean, I don't know if I was at the top of the chain. I felt like I was in a good spot. I had, think things were, pretty good, for a little while, and I was getting some nice opportunities. I wouldn't say that, I would never call myself that, but I just feel like I say I was fortunate to be in the company that I was in, and I'll take that. But, there just it wasn't bubbling up for me. And like I say, when the music started changing, I was losing interest in some of it. I didn't fall in love with freestyle as much as I liked the house music. And I liked even the old disco and soul and R&B and funk music. I preferred that stuff better just from my own musical aesthetic. So I'm like, why would I want to get into a scene of something that is not something I feel really passionate about? I'm not knocking anything. It's just like, not everybody likes every kind of food or whatever the case might be. And people have different tastes. So that's really what it was. I just felt like, this other career path was probably maybe a good decision at that point. And so I persevered. I was in a really great opportunity there, and it's turned out to be great. I was still working with sound and it was still very creative, but it was obviously post-production is different than playing live for people. So I really miss that, that energy loop with the DJ, and it well, where you're feeding them and they're feeding you back. I mean, that kind of thing. I'll never forget the first time I came back and played 2010 on Fire Island after I hadn't played there in a long, long time. At the end of the night when they were just the music stopped and they were just cheering and screaming and the tambourines are banging. I got so choked up. I mean, it was just like, it was a real moment for me. And it just feels great to be welcomed back into like the club culture community. It's a blessing for me.
Yeah, I know the feeling. I know that
I know
feeling.
you.
You must have been very choked up when they
Yeah.
gave that ovation, screaming, hooting, and hollering.
It felt good.
There's nothing better than to actually say, I could still do this and do it the right way.
Yeah. I've been thinking of you all, for so long, you know what I mean? Just as that entity, that crowd, and that's, to me, the New York crowd is coveted. You know what I mean?
Well,
And I'm not knocking anybody anywhere, but I'm just saying that's like a really special thing. That community is almost like, it's almost like a tribe. It's like
oh yeah, it's hierarchy.
family, right? It's like,
Percent. If you could turn them out, you could turn anyone out. They are the most educated, caring, loving of this music than anyone else.
they're loving though. I mean, the support you get is so. I mean, I feel like I owe a great deal of gratitude to them, too, for just the way they've welcomed me and welcomed me back. It's been. Believe me, I'm grateful for that, and I think about that a lot. And I count my blessings. That's one of them.
John, where do you see yourself going? I mean, look, a lot of guys at this age are saying, enough of this. I'm going to go pack up. I'm going to Florida. I'm going to go relax. We got the kids now, everything. Where do you see yourself?
My wife and I are still working, and we're really happy. My daughter is here in Buffalo. Obviously, I'm not a fan of the winters anymore. It's really cold outside. My neighbors were getting their driveway plowed right before we started, so thankfully they stopped just in time, so we weren't going to hear that. But right now, as long as I feel like it's not work, and a lot of the politics that went on in some of the club situations, and there's a lot of that still goes on. That takes a lot of the fun away from it. But as long as I'm surrounded by good people and I'm having fun and I can be creative and I don't have to like necessarily cater to, I'm more, if I do my job and do my homework, people are open and they want to hear what you're going to feed them. They want you to see where you're going to take them. As long as that's kind of what's happening for me and I have energy, I'll continue to do it, a handful of times a year. And every time I'm finished with one, I'm looking forward to doing it, the next time. And I'm thankful that my wife is into it to the point, and she never knew about the scene because she didn't know me back in those days. We just got married 2 years ago, but she loves everybody that she's met. She feels like so close to these people that she's got to know over the last like 7 years or whatever. And so as long as we're both having fun, and she's really super supportive about it, because without that, it would be difficult, to do. So right now I'm just going to ride it and, keep on plugging away, but I'm not putting any like expiration date on it. I guess I'll know when when it's becoming a lot for me to do, but right now it keeps me, it keeps my mind going, even though I'm still working full time, it's fun. It gives me something to focus on, to look forward to. That's it's kind of fulfilling in a way of a creative outlet. So that's a real joy for me still.
Then don't stop.
Not yet.
Don't stop.
Not yet, Lenny.
Just don't. And that means if working keeps you happy and keeps you locked in, don't stop.
I don't know what I would do. I mean, have you ever thought about that for yourself? I mean, look at you. You're busy. You're making records. By the way, that last record that you released, I love.
Thank you.
Her voice kicks. That vocal is rocking, but that's a groove. I just played it last Saturday night here at a gig. But, so you're doing such great stuff with this. You're playing, you're traveling all over the place, So do you ever think about that?
Yeah.
And what do you think when you think about it?
I tell my friends, I tell my wife the same thing. When it does stop, it stops. I'm not going to be able to do it anymore, and that'll be the end of it.
Yeah.
But I'm going to enjoy every moment I can until we can say bye.
Yeah. Right. I mean, I look at DJs that are older than me that are still doing it at a really high level, and they're inspiration to me. I mean, I don't want to name names because they might.
Well, I can name them.
Don't tell everybody that I'm older than you, but I mean, we know who they are.
Nikki came back, and Nikki's been on the road, on and off the road. I give him a lot of credit. Nikki's going,
Yeah,
and,
I mean, yeah, you can name
Robbie.
I mean, David Morales, Louis Vega. I mean, you could go on and on and on. people that are up there. I mean, I'm not sure Danny Krivitz's age, but he's got to be in that same.
Oh yeah, he's up there too. I mean, I don't want to say he's old, but he's up there.
No, he's he's if he's been playing for 40 years or longer, I'm sure it's been longer than that, right? So yeah, because he's probably played in the 70s. I think he started.
Yes,
So
yes,
he's
and
got to be in my age range, So yeah, and they're still doing it frequently and at an extremely high level. And so all of those folks are inspiration to me that I can, pick my spots. When Jelly Bean played the first Come Together, I've known him for years and years because, again, that very first summer, Michael Ellis and took me, Jimmy Burgess, we went to see Fran Jolie was hanging out in the booth with Jelly Bean and her mom at the Funhouse, and that's when I met him. And we have known him, since 1980. And when he played my birthday party, I said, "So I see you're traveling, you're going all over the place. How many gigs are you doing nowadays?" He goes, "Well, I cut way back. I was doing about 120 a year. Now I'm down to 70." And he's a little bit older than me too. He's like closer to Robbie's age. So there's another person who's I consider a friend who's still got that magic, and he's still got that energy and that creativity, and another person who inspires me.
And if that's what the muse is needed, then you know what? If they can do it, Nile Rodgers said, every day above ground is another good day.
That's right.
So you have to enjoy every day as the last, if not the best.
I've learned to live in gratitude as much as possible and try to remind myself of that often. And you know what? It makes life better. So it's really not hard to do.
And there you go. And you got the family. You got the igloo.
I got the igloo, man.
Because you guys are going to get hit with snow too again. You get a lot of lake effect snow up there.
If you ever want to come to see the Niagara Falls, it's like 20 minutes from here. So
I know I have. I've been in Toronto. Went down. It's like ridiculous. It's beyond freezing at this time. It's too cold. You can't even be outside. John Ceglia, a legend, a myth, and a man that's still doing it today as he did it yesterday, and he will do it tomorrow.
God willing.
John, you're the best. Thank you. And if you never checked out the Come Together party, make sure you get a ticket next round.
Come on down.
It's worth it. John, thank you again, and good luck to that wonderful journey that you're on. Everyone, you know where to tune to hear John Ceglia and everyone else right here at True House Stories. We'll catch you again next time. Thank you.